Everybody that's out there in video land, if you are joining us, please let me know by commenting. It's good to see you. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way. From the earth to the cross, my debt to pay. From the cross to the grave, and from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way. From the earth to the cross, my debt to pay. From the cross to the grave, and from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Amen. Last week, we finished up our hypothetical study with Ethel and Fred and reread the scriptures in the order that I used them in that study. And you'll recall that I stated there was nothing sacred about the order aside from the fact that it needed to be a progression from the foundation that they had, the foundation of knowledge that they had, toward identifying their sin problem that plagues all mankind and results in death, and then revealing through the scriptures that God knew this would occur and planned for this eventuality so that he could get all of his created children home. If they would only trust his son's ability to pay their debt for their sins. We also talked about how important it is that the listener be convinced that his sin, that her sin, was responsible for killing the Son of God, so that the Spirit can convict him or her of their sin and personal responsibility. Because lacking that conviction of guilt, there's no action. There's no, well, what should we do to remove that guilt and that sin? And then I asked for a show of hands about those who felt they could comfortably set the stage, get the study set up, ask for a study, and conduct the study. And not too many hands were raised. And that's to be expected, because not all are gifted evangelists. We talked about we all need to be evangelistic, but not all are gifted evangelists or even teachers. And even one of those, even of those whom Christ gifted to be evangelists, there are different kinds of evangelists. So we may explore that more in depth later. But right now, I want us to figure out together what each individual's role is in the church, if not to arrange and conduct a Bible study with one who needs to hear the gospel. Then what? Then what? Just I'm to show up? Is that? No. One might ask, well, where are you going with this? My answer would be that I want each of us to see that each one of us received a gift from Christ at our spiritual birth. I mean, that's what Ephesians 4 says, 4, 7, and 8, and 1 Peter 4, 10, and others. And two, I want us to consider, will I be held accountable when I appear before God for how or whether I even use that gift? Will you be held accountable? I hope you'll accept my apologies. At the end of last session, I asked about the hands, and I said I'd have some homework for you. that turned into a bigger project than I had anticipated because I'm trying to pull stuff from a number of sources. And so basically I'm having to type the questionnaire, and it's going to take longer. It'll be ready next week though, Lord willing. So please accept my apologies. I want you to recall a time. Wives are really good at this, at least mine is. And I think there are others who are. I want you to recall a time when you watched and listened to someone very close to you so that you might be able to hear hints of something they would like to have, so you could purchase a very special present that would let them know how much you care for them, how much you're paying attention to them. Maybe it wasn't something that you even went to the store for and bought, but actually spent hours working on it. Something that you made for that special person, a good friend. Perhaps you're a knitter. That's something I always thought it'd be neat to know how to do, to knit. I never had the patience to learn it. Crochet is easier. Yeah, I could probably do counted cross stitch, but I'd get crossed eyes. Perhaps you're a knitter and you spent a week working to make a beautiful sweater that could bring out the color in your best friend's eyes. I was talking to Cynthia, and she had I think she was a great aunt that could knit with blazing speed. And I asked her, I said, how long would it have taken? Because I was trying to get this for this talk, a week, a month. How long does it take to make a sweater? And her Aunt Olive, that was her name. I said, how long? She said, well, Aunt Olive was a knitter. I said, well, how long would it have taken her to make a sweater? She said, a day. I said, you have got to be kidding me. She said, no, she was incredibly fast. Well, so I said, okay, I'll say a week. A beautiful sweater that would bring out the color in your best friend's eyes. And once the gift is completed, you carefully wrapped it, and of course there's a great deal of anticipation of what's going to be the reaction when you present it. You maybe imagined how she would be surprised or he would be surprised. Maybe even imagined what might be said, the look on his face as he unwrapped the creation. Would not you anticipate that such a gift would then be worn? Suppose you were a woodworker, a little closer to my comfort level, had spent weeks crafting a bent wood rocker for your friend. You picked out just the right lumber, just the right grain. You spent hours steaming it and bending it. You sanded, you planed, you shaved, you made the joints, and you had carefully assembled and finished it, smooth as silk. It was proportioned just so. And you even knew that your friend was a little different from most people, had longer lower legs than most, and so the comfort level is better if the chair's a little higher. Otherwise, you're kind of up like this. So you'd even made the rocker a little taller than normal, just so she could sit comfortably in the rocker. In other words, it was made just for her. You give it to her, and she barely comments on it. And in fact, you go and visit multiple times over the weeks and months. And about 3 months later, you say, well, what happened to that rocker I gave you? I'm not sure if it ended up in the attic or in the basement. I don't really know. how would you feel? Do you believe there are any gifts we have received from God which he created and presented especially for us, for which we will not give account? Can you think of any? Maybe thick hair, I don't know. No.
Some of us good, some of us ain't.
That's right. We talked several sessions back about our natural bent, the characteristics and talents with which we were born. These make us the personalities we are, make us recognizable to each other. I mean, if you know the way someone runs, you don't have to be able to see, they can be a long ways away. You don't have to be able to see their face. Remember in the Old Testament, they were talking about some runners, and one of the comments made to I think it was the king, said, well, it looks like it's so-and-so because he runs like that. That's a characteristic. That is something that we are born with or develop. Maybe it's a gift that one person can visualize a plan or a blueprint in his or her mind. Most engineers are pretty good at that. They can visualize what a floor plan is going to look like, where maybe the outlets are going to need to be, how high the windows should be, because they've studied that. But they probably had some natural bent in that direction before they ever studied it. I imagine, even though Donnie's not an architect, that he could do that because of the work that he has done here. Is it a gift that one person has the gift of gab, and so that no matter how low you're feeling, you go and talk to that people and they're always just bubbling up and they've got a joke to tell you and they've got a story to tell? And is that a gift of a natural characteristic?
Debatable.
Only if your name's Debbie, right? Is it a gift that one person, and here again, we're talking about characteristics with which we're born. Is it a gift that one person prefers, would rather be alone than with a bunch of people? And when presented with a problem or a situation, he or she may spend hours analyzing the problem, thinking about all the angles. What if this? What if that? I don't know. Maybe even making a list, pros, cons, different alternatives, before deciding on a course of action. Now, if you are not of that nature, if you're a person that, let's get it done, let's go in and do it, that will drive you nuts, right? Is patience a gift, or is it learned? Yes and yes, right? So, to a degree, some people have more patience than others just because of their genetic and environmental influences. But patience can be learned also to a degree. Some people are more inclined to be patient. I've never sat in one of his classes, but I can imagine that Leonard, as a teacher, is very patient with someone who is trying to learn. Probably not so much if they're just messing around. Right? Yeah. So, this is why it's so easy for us to get confused if we're trying to analyze these things based on our human wisdom. Is it something they were born with? Is it something that's developed? Is it because of an interest they had, which is something you were born with? Is it a gift from God? And if we're using human wisdom and training and life experiences, it can get so confusing. What's the origin of all good gifts? Whether you're born with it or whether it's a gift at your rebirth. What is the origin of all good gifts that make us more perfect, more complete? God, okay. Based on what?
He's good. All goodness.
Okay.
Everything good comes from him.
Is there a scripture that we could turn to? Let's go to slide 169, Denny, I'm sorry. My fault. I misdirected you. What does James 1 say? 17. Every good and perfect gift, or every good action, every good gift is from God. They come from the Creator of the sun, moon, and stars. It's where they come. Ma'am.
What is included in every good action? Is that everything that happens around us, or
Well,
sometimes things just work, but it's not because of anything we did, it just happens that way?
anybody have an answer for that?
Things don't just happen.
Okay.
Our gifts are given through the Holy Spirit from Christ, just as He wishes.
But you're not talking about spiritual gifts, are you?
I'm talking about that every good action.
Every good action,
And
okay.
a lot of times later, I think if this had happened, if that had happened, it would have been a
Yes,
disaster.
yes.
But it didn't.
And
And it wasn't anything that I manipulated or did. It just, I usually think by God's grace, I didn't do
there you go. And if we didn't know God, what would we say? Well, that was lucky, right? That's what we'd say if we didn't know God. So
I
we,
say, thank you, God.
yes, yes. We recognize that all good and perfect gifts, all actions, there are two forces in the world, right? What are they? Good and evil. Where does this one come from? Good. Always comes from God. Always, 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 always comes from God. Always. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. Is that good? Yes. Where does it come from? God. Yeah. The sun shines each day for the righteous and the unrighteous. Is it good? Unless you're having a workout in it. Yes, it's good. All right. We've already read some of these passages that I want us to consider, but these verses form a framework in which we have to work. Because remember, if we're trying to reason this out by human reasoning, we can really get what's what. Where are the lines? So it's good to keep these fresh in our minds. I want you to turn to Luke 12. Few people here, a lot of people. In Luke 12.
Innumerable.
Right. Some translations say thousands. How many were there? How many? I mean, he says there were so many that they were stepping on each other. A lot of folks packed together. And Jesus starts teaching. So, we're going to jump down to verse 22. Who is speaking?
Jesus,
Jesus is speaking to
his father.
his followers. Okay. And now we've got that set. We know who's being spoken to and who is speaking. We're going to go on down to 35. Just prior to that, he says in 34, your heart's going to be where your treasure is. So be careful where you put your treasure. All right. 35, he says, Mark, why don't you read down through 40 if you don't mind.
Let your waist be girded and your lamps burning, and you yourselves be like men who wait for their master when he will return from the wedding, that when he comes and knocks, they may open to him immediately.
Okay, let's stop there for just a moment. The master's been away at a wedding. What is likened to a wedding or a bride in the New Testament?
Church.
The church. And it talks about he's wanting to give his bride clean, spotless before the throne, right? That's what comes to mind here for me. Go ahead, Mark, please.
Blessed are those servants whom the master, when he comes, will find watching. Assuredly, I say to you that he will gird himself and have them sit down to eat, and will come and serve them. And if he should come in the second watch, and come in the third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants. But know this, that if the master of the house has known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour that you do not expect.
I think, as a friend of mine says, or a rabbit trail, because he is saying, he's using this side analogy to say, you have to always be ready. You have to always be ready. I mean, as ready as you would be if you knew when a thief was going to come to your house. You'd be ready with a shotgun. Okay. The picture. The master has gone to a wedding. He's gotten everything ready. He comes home, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. And all these servants are sitting around just waiting to serve him. What does he do?
He's going to serve them.
He's going to serve them. What does that bring to mind?
Christ's second.
Christ coming to take us to the table, to the feast. All things are ready, come to the feast, right? Jesus is coming to take us to the feast. We're sitting, we're anticipating his coming back so that we can continue to serve him. He says, I'm here. I'm gonna let's go upstairs. I got a surprise for you. And he dresses to serve and then seats everybody and serves this magnificent meal. Peter says, why, Lord, did you tell this story? Was that story for us? Or was it just for those people that were in the crowd? So there's a shift here. Now he's talking to his followers. And at least for me, it doesn't make any sense why he would answer with this parable unless it is because he's saying, you're going to have some special things to do. And he uses an example. Donnie, how's your reading today? You want to read 42 through 48, please.
And the Lord said, who then is faithful and sensible steward, whom his master will put in charge of his servants, to give them their rations at the proper time?
Okay, so he's going to be in charge of feeding the household, feeding all the other servants. Go ahead, please.
Blessed is the servant whom his master finds so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if the slave says in his heart, my master will be a long time in coming, and begins to beat the slaves, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour when he does not know, and he will cut him in pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. And that slave, who knew his master's will and did not get ready or act in accord with his will receive many lashes. But the one who did not know it and committed deeds worthy of a flogging will receive but few. From everyone who has been given much, much will be required, and to whom they have entrusted much, of him they will ask all the more.
Okay. The first part of the story, get ready. He's coming back. The second part of the story, to those who are anticipating his coming, and you've got some jobs to do. In this case, I want you to feed the household. If we were thinking about spiritual gifts, what gift would that be? And there's more than one right answer. Feed the flock that are among you. Who does that apply to? Teachers, okay. That's not the scripture I had in mind, but yes, teachers. Who else? And what are the leaders called?
The elder.
Elders and pastors, right? So at least those two gifts are covered here when he says, I want you to take charge of feeding the household while I'm gone. Teachers and pastors, elders. What does Peter caution about? I think it's Peter. He's talking about the elders. He says, don't lord it over. See, that's the problem. We had two feeders, two servants, two servant attitudes here. One, I've got this responsibility. I'm going to do it to the best of my, I don't know when he's coming back, but I'm just going to keep doing it. As long as I'm able, I'm just going to keep doing it. The other maybe starts out that way. But then, let's say it's a teacher. This teacher says, I'm better than everybody else anyway. I'm just going to You gotta do it my way. Look, this is the way. You see the pitfall that we get into. We have to have one other ingredient with any gift. One other ingredient that we'll talk about, and you already know the answer to that. The servants have been, a servant has been given a responsibility. That's his gift. That responsibility can be used to the glory of God, or it can be abused by beating the other servants over the head with it. You see that? Does this say that to you? Yes, no? Okay. So here's the question, the answer to the question that I asked about whether we'll be accountable for how our gifts from the Lord were used, isn't it? It's right here. If one realizes her gift or his gift, but misuses it, there's punishment that's ahead. What about if you never we talked about the big gift and it just sits in the middle. What if you never unwrap the gift? So you didn't know really what you should do, and so what happens? Because there's a servant like that here.
You haven't accepted the gift.
You haven't accepted the gift, so what happens? Are you subject to punishment?
You still get beaten.
That's right. That's right. Not as much. But you're still punished. It says, the servant who does not know what his master wants and does things that should be punished will be beaten with few blows. If you've been given a lot, much will be demanded. And from the one trusted with much more will be expected. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't he talking about knowledge here? If you don't know, I mean, we're always to try to be learning, but the person that doesn't know what his master wants, he doesn't know what to do. He needs to be taught and he needs to be seeking. But the one that has been taught, then he has no excuse.
Well, he's doing a contrast, it looks like to me, in 47 and 48. He's doing a contrast. He starts out, I've got this servant, and he's given this assignment. That's his or her gift. And the one, initially, the one servant used it very well. The second servant, we don't know how it started out, but it didn't end well, because it was used to abuse other members of the household. And so the one who is abusing, the master comes back and finds him doing that in 47. And he just whoops up on him. And then he says, but the servant that doesn't know what is... See, this servant knew what he wanted, knew what the master wanted, and did not do it. So, in a sense, it is knowledge, but it's knowledge that probably... Otherwise, why would he be punished? Are you punished for not knowing something if you're not supposed to have known it?
If you don't receive the reward, that is punishment, isn't it?
Yeah. Denny?
Isn't it sort of up to the servant to know the master? When we look at the parable of the bags of gold, the parable of money, that he was trusted, that he gave free a certain amount, and it doesn't if I remember that without looking at it, I don't think he tells them to go to do anything with that. But then the third servant says, I knew that you were this way. I knew some things about you. But all three did something with it. Well, the guy buried it.
Right.
That's doing something, but not what the master expected. So, isn't it, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here, isn't it up to the servant to know the master? Or is it up to the master to make sure the servant gets to know you?
Yes.
He knows us. He already knows us.
A lot of people, though, don't consider that you have a new servant. And those that have had, say medical practices or whatever, whenever they hire a new person, it's impossible to teach them all that they need to know the first few days that they're with you. A little leniency is given till that learning curve is achieved. Otherwise, somebody that's been there a long time and knows you very well, it's not that easy.
Yeah. And that is true. The question I would ask, I mean, this struck me a certain way, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way it should be taken. Is that what this lesson is trying to teach? Because remember what Peter said. Was that for us? Or was it for the crowd? And then Jesus gives him a parable about responsibility. You, Peter. And the other apostles.
Is that the same you people that was talked about in Acts 2 and 3? You people are the ones that killed him. It's your responsibility.
They were responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. They were. Were they supposed to have been feeding the household?
Not at that point.
Right.
You said something just like real quick. I think the Lord knows us well, better than we know ourselves. And He's going to be patient with us. But the word I always said, that love is attitude. If we have the right attitude, like I said, seek and you'll find. If you try, you're going to stop. If you get up again and again and again, you're going to make it.
And there are so many, you quoted, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door shall be opened to for everyone that asketh, receiveth, and so on. There are so many things that we could bring in and attach to this present sitting in the middle of the floor, aren't there? So many scriptures. That's one of them. Why didn't you look? You could have at least opened it. Yes, ma'am.
We are those people, Christ isn't going to be here to teach. So we are those people that are to be teaching now. So that gives us a sense of urgency to, we are the teachers now of Christ.
And that's why I started out with this evangelistic thing. Because, let's say, Dawn, I'm going to pick on you. Let's say Dawn's not an evangelist. She's happy to talk to people about the Lord if they say something, but she is not a person that is going to say, well, would you like to get together for a Bible study? Now, that's probably not the case, but again, example. So, is she just supposed to come here and warm the pews and encourage us all by her appearance? No. That's what we're trying to get to as far as the gifts, and that's why I use this passage, because he is giving Peter, Is that for us, Lord? Or no, but this is. He didn't say that. But he did definitely seem to indicate, this is for you, Peter. And anybody else that's sitting around here that are of the chosen 12. You have an assignment. Talking for Jesus about this. You have an assignment. Feed the household. When I get back, let's say there's another servant, and the other servant doesn't know that they're supposed to feed the household. That's the way I see this, is one servant was made aware and abused his privilege. There's another servant that wasn't aware. He could have maybe helped serve at least. Get the bread on the table and put the napkins and the silverware out. But he didn't know that that was what he was supposed to do. And so he's still going to be punished because he didn't unwrap the gift that he was supposed to be a feeder to. Again, that's my perspective on this. Maybe I'm going too far. You okay? I didn't pick on you too much. Okay, excellent. Let's. We'll be in Romans next week. Any other comments or questions? The point I wanted to make with that story in Luke is, again, we have our characteristics. We all have our personalities. But there is a specific gift that is given to us as an assignment to carry out. And the servant who knows what his master wants but is not ready will be beaten with many blows, or does not do what the master wants. The servant who does know what his master wants and does things that should be punished will be beaten with few blows. Now, it's possible the way this particular translation is worded, that instead of feeding them once a day, he kept the food out all the time. I don't know. I mean, you could get that from that. He does some things that should be punished. But if you've been given a lot's going to be expected.
But for that dutiful servant that has served and served and served, it's very difficult for him, knowing his master and loving his master, to do things that are against his will.
Yes, ma'am.
One lady that was in class one time, she hadn't said too much, and we were kind of studying about this, and she said, well, it doesn't take a person great in knowledge, or, a great person to be a Christian. I think her words were a great man, but it takes everything that he has. We have to give it our all.
And we're going to read about that.
And we grow.
Yeah.
The more we do, the more we know. And do we ever realize how much we can do? Do we ever realize what our gifts are until we try?
Right. There is a way that hopefully, and we're kind of trying to go down that path, where we can not just guess. We can know with some certainty at least. So we'll see.
Well, we were talking about a gift a while ago, encouragement,
Right.
which is, like the other, is a huge gift, but it has to be used.
Yes. Yeah. You know a song that comes to my mind here, and we'll close. Does anybody remember the song, Teach Your Children Well?
Way before my time, but I remember.
Thank you for your participation.
Steve,
Yes, sir.
I think a lot of times on this,